What I love about April is we're actually from the end of March, and we're going to also include some of this. You should be doing the end of March, beginning of April. There's a little overlap there. But there's a lot that we can do out in the field right now. We're finally getting the Kubota, for example. We've been running around with our Polaris Ranger, has tracks on it, and to get it out in the mud, the snow, and going down in our steep terrain, we literally can't get down there. We couldn't get down there with a snowmobile, with deep snow, but we can get down there with our tracked Ranger. And then what we do with the Kubota and the RTV is that we spray. And so a lot of times I sprayed a total of 120 acres last year, thereabouts, repeated sprayings, food plots, and switchgrass areas. And so I use it a lot, and we're using it all summer long. It has air conditioning and low center of gravity. So I like that for that. But we just got it out yesterday. We just went through a tank of spray, and I'll talk about spraying a little bit. So maybe if you don't like spraying, we'll talk about that at the end too, but at least listen to some of this deer hunting stuff in the beginning. But bottom line is we're enjoying getting outdoors, and I hope you are too. Some of the things we're really transitioning to, birds chirping, sunlight, 60-degree weather. It's been pretty nice. So, and right now it kind of represents that big time before we're getting a lot of foliage in the woods. So you think about that, all these things you want to get done before the green takes place. I look at properties for clients, and so does Dylan, so does Kevin, and so does Joe Youngblood over in Michigan and over a portion of Minnesota or Wisconsin. But we look at properties all the way through September, August, September, so around there. My favorite time personally is when the leaves are off the trees. It's no bugs. You can see the land better. Even with several inches of snow, I really never cared about how cold it was, other than if there's extreme winds. But I really like to be able to see the land. Now, when we get into June, July, August, September, and we have all the leaves on the trees, you can still see the land, but we just have to walk further. Obviously, if there's an 80-acre hollow with wooded hardwood, with hardwoods and big trees, we can't see the other side. When there's leaves on the trees, we can see that during the winter. Now we just have to walk to the other side or drive to the other side and look at every square inch. So it just takes a little bit extra time in the woods. Dylan, when would your favorite time to be walking properties?
I would say within the last couple weeks, like mid-March is my favorite. Right when the snow is just disappearing, but still crusty enough that you aren't getting super muddy. You can see sign from the last fall really well. See trails sticking out like crazy. That's my favorite time. And
it's beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, some of this can't beat. It's kind of like some of those crisp fall days that we look forward to. Those are my favorite. These are my favorite. Summertime's okay, wintertime's okay, but, and that's kind of a reminder. Joe, Dylan and I are scheduled out for the year. We might have an opportunity to stick one here or there. But that's where Kevin and Joe come in. So they've been flying to clients or scheduling fly-ins, and then they've been driving to clients within their area too. So Joe Youngblood and Kevin Smith, they're still filling out their schedule, and that'll be full within a month or two, I'm sure, completely. And they've just started scheduling in the last month, so their days are going fast. And if you're interested in having someone coming out from our team, make sure you contact us pretty quick. Number one, flagging deer signs. And what I like are deer stands. What I like about this time of year, again, is no leaves on the trees. And what I found many times, Dylan and I have been out in the woods shooting video, and a lot of times we're not just shooting video, we're looking at what can we be doing in that area, and we're really scouring that area for where can we put a stand, where's the deer sign right now, where the buck's been traveling. And then you go back there during the summertime and you just get lost. There's so many leaves and foliage in the area. What seems so easy to pick a stand out right now turns into a little bit of a hassle in June and July. And
there's nothing worse than being like, oh, I'll remember that tree.
Oh my gosh.
It's like, wait, was it that one or that one? I know it had to hit this trail, but I can't see it right now.
That's so true. Yeah, and the bad thing is I'm 52 right now, and I've been doing this for many years, and I still haven't learned. So I say flagging trees right now. We have trees picked out. We've picked them out as a team, and I really still need to mark them. So I'm hoping to do that pretty soon here. That's one of my chores I have to do. But again, everything just lays out, and we're picking stand locations based on fall signs. So you have to be very critical of, is this winter sign where you have pellets on top of pellets? Because typically during the fall, now you do in some areas where there's high deer population, but typically you don't have pellets on top of pellets. When you get into the winter months, deer are more concentrated, so beds, pellets, And sign that is left over from the wintertime can be very deceiving. Think about those winter food sources where deer are congregated. Does this make sense? Ask yourself, is this deer going to be here that left this sign in November, in October, in December? And you better have a good reason why. And that's what's most important. Ask yourself why all the time. For example, right now, we have a lot of sheds that drop around here in February, middle of February, in through early March, middle of March. There'll still be some hanging around end of March, early April every year. But that being said, a lot of those sheds are dropping somewhere else. Some of those good signs of a great property, that you're not finding a lot of sheds. Now, with the exception of if you have big winter food sources where you specifically have those out to hold the deer during the wintertime. And then also, of course, you're not seeing those bucks during the summertime. And typically, what I find is there's a really good overlap of where deer are spending their time in the summertime and where they're at during the wintertime. There's a lot of times that's a very similar area. So it's almost like we want to find sheds. We want to have good winter food that is specific to holding deer and keeping them fat and healthy during the wintertime. But at the same time, we're not too concerned if we're not finding sheds. But it's very important that we're basing our actual stand locations and where we're going to hunt on fall sign, not necessarily where we're finding sheds, and certainly we're not seeing them during the summer. There's a big difference for where they're at in the fall. So always ask yourself, does this make sense that these deer will be here during the fall? And when you go into that area, we're already going into that area because we think it's a good fall area. And then this time of year allows us to see that roadmap. It allows us to see, it doesn't matter if it was fall sign or winter sign, that sign is very evident right now. So what we're looking at, when we think a buck is going through this area, it's in a certain funnel, those trails right now are just, they really pop out. And so it doesn't matter if there's old rubs, old scrapes, whatever it is, we're going into that area. And well before, and let's face it, a lot of times these areas are not used during the summertime. So you go into these areas, they look dead in the summertime sometimes. A lot of our trail cam locations, a lot of our mock scrape areas, they're dead during the summertime. And that's okay. So great time to mark your stands. And then a lot of times we're fast forwarding. I'm not putting those stands out, especially the trees that we can think in our head where we don't need a lot of clearing in these areas. I'm not putting those back into August because we're not clearing shooting lanes that go 100 yards out and drawing lanes right back to the stand and making a big mess. We're clearing lanes specific to getting a 25, 30 yard shot, 20 yards, 15 yards, in close quarters for bow. And so the most important aspect is picking the right stand location. And then we have a lot of other things to do in April, May, June, July, often before actually going in and sticking stands in the actual location. So several months from now, the stands that we're marking right now in April at a great time when we can move around a lot, see all the old sign after the snows melt. It's a perfect time to do so, but we might not be back for a long time. Number 2, trail cams out of the woods. We have a lot of trail cams still in the woods, and I keep getting pictures of bucks with no antlers or does walking by. And it's kind of cool to see them on a daily basis, but we really don't need them out there. So I like to give them a break. Let's face it, they're electronics. We've had incredible luck with our Access trail cameras. They have a 5-year warranty, but we hardly have ever any failures. And so I like having those out in the woods, but at the same time, it's not a bad idea to get them in, dry them out, update any firmware that needs to take place in the cameras, whether it's for the cell cameras or the SD card with the lifts. They have the renders for cell cameras and then the lifts. The bottom line is we still leave some in some areas, some of our open fields where we expect turkeys. Turkeys are like deer. A lot of times they yard up, flock up during the winter time. Someone's corn crib where there's silage, whatever it might be, but they'll get into huge flocks and they start spreading back into their spring ranges. So that's just happening right now. We want to identify where those turkeys are coming in. We'll leave some cameras out there. And then we're really starting to get those cameras back in the woods end of May, June, especially end of June into July. Because end of June into July, we can look at bucks with velvet and start to say, you know, that's berry from last year. That's 7.4. That's 45. You know, some of those we expect to see jam 4. All these different bucks we expect to come back. We know made through the season. We can start to identify them in June. Great time to leave your cameras out for a couple months, except for the turkeys. Number 3, last minute bedding cutting. I want to do some more cutting around the house right here. So I have some trees to knock down, and I really want to get that done before leaf out. So leaf out, I would imagine, would be end of April, early May, most of the time around here in southeast Minnesota, southwest Wisconsin, southern Michigan. And then it'll be a little bit sooner, obviously a couple weeks sooner, southern Indiana, southern Illinois, let alone if you get down in West Virginia, Tennessee, Oklahoma, you get some much earlier spring, and so some of these is almost going to be a little bit late for some of you when you get down in those southern central portions of the United States. But great time to go in and make some of those last minute bedding cuttings. Dylan and I went in and I cut an area and Dylan filmed it down at the bottom. It's already a thick area. Where we cut, it was more of an open area and it had some old box elder. So we're extending that bedding area down there. We gave it a pretty appreciable cut. And we'll get a lot of regeneration down there and it'll be a lot higher value for deer. Now, what we were able to do, because there's a lot of low brush in there and briars, but we offered a significant variety and diversity of browse by cutting some of that box elder down there. And so we widened that bedding area quite a bit. And I don't even know if we went through a half tank of gas. So this is something I might have cut for 25 minutes, a half hour. And so when we start looking all around the farm, just to go in and cut a half tank of gas in one spot is an appreciable amount of cutting as it relates to what the value for the deer. So great time to do so before leaf out. This is our last push to do so. And they talk about oak wilt, and oak wilt starts to take place if you're cutting as leaves are popping out and actually forming. Oaks are some of the last leaves to form in the woods. So typically you have till mid-May to cut without the risk of oak wilt, but really pay attention to when your oaks are actually leafing out and stopping cutting at that point if oak wilt is a concern in your area. Talk about hinge cuts for a second. Again, I see people out there as habitat professionals, they're actually cutting trees 8, 10, 12 inches in diameter and getting hinge cuts. They're doing so at head high or higher. And there's a skill involved in that, but I'm not saying that's smart to do. Again, it's putting a lot of cover above the head, a lot of browse above the head, and it's very, very dangerous, even if you're good at it and good at what you do. So always keep in mind, hinge cuts are a viable tool in the toolbox of deer habitat management. There's folks out there that hinge cut in every property. They're gonna cut some of those mature large trees. They're gonna cut more of the hingeable size, which is more like 4 to 7 inches, 3 to 7 inches. And you shouldn't cut all the time. You shouldn't look at it like we're going to cut hinge cuts on everything. Or at the same time, someone says that hinge cuts aren't a viable tool. They're probably a logger, a forester, someone that really doesn't understand the relationship, that these can be managed for decades. They can live and grow for decades. And it provides an additional amount of cover when you're putting them waist high off the ground at deer level. Deer need side cover. So right away with a hinge cut, you're offering an appreciable amount of side cover without any regeneration taking place. If you cut that at an appropriate height, which is more mid-level, more waist high, easy cuts for you, then you're getting browse right in the face of deer and you're getting cover right in their face, right alongside them. And so it is a very good tool. It's not appropriate everywhere. Again, we recommend it 15-20% of the time at most, but it is something you should do. Really watch out for hinge cutting some of those big mature trees. There's really no value in that. They're stump sprouting anyways. So you're cutting that, getting the stump sprout, and letting the log and top lay in the ground. If you want to leave it out there or take it for firewood, the bottom line is that log and top is adding appreciable amount of side cover. If you've ever seen a blowdown in a big open public land forest, I've hunted 20 years in the open public land of Pennsylvania, over 30 years in Michigan on public land. When you go out in some of those open hardwoods that aren't managed specifically for wildlife, a couple blowdowns in an area can have a huge number of beds during the wintertime. You can just see them scattered all around that, and they'll relate to that. The same during the fall, because there's really no other cover for them to relate to, and you'll get a little browse pockets within there too. So getting those on the ground is really important. So really watch out for those high hinge cuts, and anyone that recommends those, you really don't want to fall into that trap. It's very, very dangerous. I know Kevin Smith was on a property last week, and he showed me a picture of it, and he had a recommendation from someone up in Michigan, came down. And I'm not picking on a certain person in Michigan. There's a lot of people in Michigan, a lot of habitat consultants. But someone came down and recommended that he hinge cut the entire woods just about. And they were mostly trees 10, 12, 14, 16 inches in diameter. And the guy looked at it kind of like, this is dangerous, this is ridiculous. So he scrapped that plan and hired Kevin. So Kevin went in there, rightfully so, told him, no, you should have this timbered, you should have it harvested, you have valuable lumber. If you hinge cut, it's going to be at the end, but there's a lot you can have the logger do well before that takes place. And so to keep from killing the guy, maybe Kevin saved his life, who knows? But bottom line is, there's just a lot of dangerous stuff out there that can take place with a chainsaw, and I want you guys to be safe, and that's a big part of it. So then we get down in the chemicals here. You know, a lot of this stuff, picking deer stands, trail cams, looking for bedding areas, whether you're cutting them or finding them, it's kind of a private land, public land thing. You can do just about, I mean, you're still scouting for bedding areas. You're still looking for tree stand locations this year on public land. You might have trail cameras out. You're getting them out of the woods, checking the cards and seeing what inventory is left of bucks last year. But when it comes down here for chemicals and even opening roads here at the bottom, of course, private land. And I just want to say again for chemicals real quick, there's folks out there that don't like chemicals, but literally I would just do TSI, timber stand improvement. I wouldn't plant food plots and even have switchgrass if I had to rely on no chemicals. Because there's rotations out there, there's multiple diskings, multiple plowing that you can do. We have too many hills around here. We'd create a lot of erosion. We'd strip the topsoil off. We'd dry out the topsoil with repeated disking. And so chemicals are safe, you can use them safely, and they can be a great help. Now, I'm always looking for limiting the chemical use. That's why we have the buckwheat rotation in the middle of summer, and that allows us to improve the soil at the same time. We have a lot of soil improvers within our blends that we recommend for planting in our food plots. And so we're always improving the soils, and we're making sure they don't erode. We're not drying out the soils. We're always working on that top layer. And so I recommend using chemicals. And it's so that you can have an effective. I want to see if you're planting 3 acres on your 80 acres or 40 acres that you own of food plots. I want to make sure you get a full 3 acres, because most of the time when I see people not using chemicals, they're planting 3 acres, and even if they're doing it quote right with repeated diskings, tillings, even incorporating other crops, they're bringing a crop into the fall that represents a half acre out of 3 acres, 3/4 of an acre out of 3 acres. They're not getting the full benefit of their acreage, means they're wasting time and money. And sure, they can tell someone they didn't use chemicals, but if they're actually getting 3/4 of an acre of actual food and volume out of a 3 acre plot, they didn't accomplish much. When it comes to frost seeding switchgrass, simazine, that's what I did yesterday. I went through a 45-gallon tank of it. So I got a lot done on the farm here in Minnesota. We have a lot more to do. But I'm using simazine, which is a pre-emergent, used 3 quarts per acre. It does not kill switchgrass, so you have to worry about that. You don't want to put more than 3 quarts. Around 3 quarts is a recommended amount. So I would just use 3 quarts. And it's pretty easy. You buy a 2.5-gallon jug of Roundup. That's good for killing about 3 acres. There's 10 quarts in there. So you're putting that in the mix, 3 quarts per acre, and you're applying it before you see spring green up. So for some of you down south, you're gonna see this and it's too late for you to plant or for you to use simazine. I'm using simazine. It knocks down a lot of the broadleafs and it gives your switchgrass a little bit less weed competition going into the growing season. And so that's where that simazine can be a powerful tool, but not as powerful as the mix of 2,4-D and 2 quarts of glyphosate. And so I'll talk about that in a second. If you're not able to get the simazine in the ground, all is not lost. You just have to make sure you maintain your switch. And so I'm using 3 quarts of simazine on my current existing stanza switch, especially areas where I see weeds coming in. We have a beautiful area we call the redneck corner in the back. I think I'll spray that, but the weeds are very minimal in there. So I'm gonna really focus the spray on those areas where there's weeds. When I drive around, I can actually turn it off and on in the inside of the cab. So I'll focus on those weedy areas. And even then, there's not a lot of weeds. And you'll see the value of switchgrass in some of these videos too, because we showed you earlier 5 different ways we planted switchgrass and what it looked like popping through the snow. It all looked about the same. Now we can go out there, and what's pretty cool is there's areas where that switchgrass was laid down with heavy snow. It pops right back up as soon as it melts. So even though we had standing switchgrass here in the winter, some of it does get where it's drifted over, getting blasted by the field edge. Crazy right now, it's all standing 5, 6, 7 feet tall. This is really cool, really beautiful to see right now and very full. And we just want to maintain it like that. And so some of my areas, I might mow in May, and that's the last time I'm mowing this year in Minnesota, or mowing ever, for the foreseeable future anyways, for a decade or more. Once you get it in the ground right, again, going back to proper chemical use mowing, then it can last for 10, 15, 20 years before you have to do anything. You always have to watch it. Simazine is a pre-emergent. Once green is popping into woods, it's too late to use, but it's a really good step. And then I'm frost seeding. So right now it's March 21st, and we have some 40s in the forecast, some 50s, 60, I think 60 today. That means if we have 40s, we're going to have in the 20s. We're going to have some frost and freeze. And really, this switchgrass around here is not going to germinate until mid-May or later. And that's if it has significant and enough moisture to germinate it over a couple weeks. And so we're a long ways away from switchgrass germinating. I think last year it was a late germination just because we had a little bit of drought in that early time of year. So we can get a lot of switchgrass germinating until mid-June in a lot of areas. So people are looking at like it was a failed planting. We really just hadn't germinated yet. The frost seeding is important after the simazine. You know, if I have choice to get it all done, I chose yesterday. I'm going to focus on frost seeding more later this weekend, but I want to get all my simazine on the ground first before that spring green up takes place, because when you start seeing 40s, 50s, and 60s, we're not that far off from spring green up. It takes place really fast, and there's been a lot of years I've been caught with even purchasing the simazine, and then I just ran out of time. I had a client trip. I did it after the client trip, and then here green was already in the woods, so I couldn't spray. So frost seeding is important. Again, with frost seeding switchgrass, a real good recipe for that is Earthway Model 2750 spreader set on setting 1.5, and that should be roughly about 8 to 10 pounds per acre of switch. And when you have switch, you want it thick. You don't want it laying down, and you don't want to be able to see through it. You're typically using it for screening actual bedding areas on the inside of the woods or wherever. So great time to frost seed. There's still plenty of time, and that brings me to hard and soft seed. We have a separate switchgrass video that we're completing today on how to frost seed switchgrass. There's various types of seed. You'll see 50% hard seed or 20%, 5%. John Comp had some that was over 90% last year that was soft seed, meaning it's available for germination right away. The hard seed, it's okay to put that in the ground right now. It's going to have numerous frosts and freezes and excessive moisture, so it'll open right up. So John Comp has hard seed right now. I think it's a 50% rate. It's what he could find at the moment. It's not too bad. You know, you can put that hard seed down the ground and expect it to germinate this year, this early in the game, and that's why it's really important. We're actually going to get this out. We're filming this on Monday. We're going to get this out on Thursday. So we're going to get this out right away because I don't want you guys to miss this opportunity. And then finally, number 6, once the weeds are 8 to 10 inches tall, 12 inches, you have warm weather, meaning 50s, 60s, sunny, rainy, you know, that good spring mix of good growth for weeds. That's when we're spraying that 1 pint per acre of 2,4-D mixed with 2 quarts per acre of glyphosate. 1 pint per acre, 2,4-D, 2 quarts per acre of glyphosate. That's a really important spraying. That's more important than simazine because you'll get a 95% knockdown, at least for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks of weeds in that area. So by the time you use the simazine, limit weeds, use the 2,4-D and Roundup, you're really getting a great step. And you might find that you still have to mow in July because you have some weeds coming up with the switch. You're mowing in July because switchgrass features exponential growth. What that means is it starts to germinate in June, then July it grows a little bit, and all of a sudden in August it just shoots right up. You're trying to mow right about here. Right before that time, mid-July, end of July, before the switchgrass is going to shoot up. That way when you mow it, it can outcompete any of the weeds it's growing against. And so by the time and we'll show you some frost seeding today where we're frost seeding into what looks like a bunch of weeds and goldenrod, because it is. And we're going to actually kill that with simazine, and we'll show you that today. We'll actually frost seed it, kill it with simazine, and then we'll wait till that spring green up time and everything's green. Then we'll hit it with 2,4-D and Roundup, and then we'll just plan on mowing. And we've had great success with that. We'll show you some areas that are weedy where we did that too last year, but you have to follow the steps. And you can get a third spraying in there of glyphosate if the switch hasn't germinated. That's a big if. I know Kevin Smith was with a client last week, and he sprayed glyphosate sometime in mid-June. I can guarantee the switch is already viable and starting to germinate at that time, so probably killed the switch off. At the same time, he talked to someone that put 2,4-D in the ground in early June. 2,4-D stays in the ground for 3 weeks and it will kill the switch. Even though it's a broadleaf specific herbicide, it will kill young switch and it'll actually injure old switch pretty easily if you don't put the exact amount down. But it'll always kill the young switch, especially germinating switch. It will keep it from germinating and actually kill it when it does germinate. So be very careful. Sometimes you can get that extra spraying of glyphosate, but I'm not going to recommend you even try that unless you've been doing this for a long time, because the risk of failure is way too high and most people aren't paying attention. They just hear, oh, I can spray again in glyphosate. Even though we talk about it's going to germinate sometime in May, they're spraying in June and killing their freshly germinated switch, which a lot of times is only 1/8 of an inch high with a very little leaf and very hard to find. Once you pick it out, you can see it. And then number 7, with all the leaves down, with all the trees that fall during the fall and the winter months, is a great time to clear your trails so you can enjoy them for the entire summer. Unless you have big windstorms during the summer, typically what you're clearing right now with comfortable temperatures and no leaves on the ground so you can see everything is a lot easier to do right now than in July or August with bugs and leaves and all kinds of pickers, stickers, and everything else growing in the trails. So we've been clearing out trails across our ravine down in the Big Hollow and opening up trails that we've never used before. Now we do have the luxury of the Ranger with the tracks. That allows us to get through some very rocky areas and areas we can't take the wheeled machines. So we're very fortunate with that. But at the same time, we're trying to open up all those trails we can. So whether we're taking the tracks down there or we're taking wheeled machines, we can get around and hopefully we can get a dozer in there someday. There's just all these steps to do to open up some of our trails. So again, a lot to do in April. Hope you're enjoying getting out in the woods. Again, think about hiring Joe or Kevin. Their schedules are filling up fast. Joe from Michigan, eastern portion of Wisconsin, and then Kevin out in Ohio and Pennsylvania. And of course, they are flying to clients. I think Kevin said he had flying clients in Kentucky, Missouri. Do you know anywhere else?
Oh, that's all I
Dylan?
know of at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, and he's been working on filling that schedule of fly-ins, and those are something we book well in advance, and typically you don't do, I think I've gone to 9 fly-ins in 1 year. Dylan, you've broken records on fly-ins, so I don't even want to see how many flying clients you've gone to.
Wednesday.
Yeah, exactly. How many trips have you gone to fly-ins this year so far? I mean, have you been on 8 trips, 10 trips?
I'm a gold member on both American and Delta.
I don't know if that's a good thing, but anyways, make sure you check those guys out. Really appreciate watching. There's a lot to do, and we really enjoy bringing the progression of this. The April Deer Chores through March of next year has really turned into more of what we're doing on the property. A lot of that times, priority-wise, that relates to what you should be doing too. So I hope you can learn something from this and from these tips, and at the same time, help keep you on track for a great habitat and a great hunt this fall. Folks, I want to make sure you check out my web class video series, whether it's how to design your food plot program or how to design your property in general. And we have a new one coming out that'll be how to hunt the rut. But these bucks back here are a testament. Some of these bucks go back to 93. They're even in different states. I urge you to check out those web classes that you can help yourself, help your land, help your hunt. The link is in the description. And also for those that have tried them out, I encourage you to offer some feedback in the comments below. Thank you.